Joaquim Muniz Pereira didn't leave with just a suitcase. He took with him the future he had promised to the woman who loved him more than anyone in the world. 7 years ago, he abandoned Rosa Maria while she was pregnant, without a single explanation, believing in a lie he never wanted to question. Today he has returned, but don't be fooled. The rich man stepping out of that luxurious pickup truck didn't come to ask for forgiveness. He came for something that money shouldn't be able to buy. And what he finds behind those wooden gates will change his life forever. Our stories spread far. Where are you watching from today? Share with us in the comments. Joaquim Muniz Pereira abandoned his pregnant wife without looking her in the eyes, without listening to what she wanted to say. He grabbed the suitcase, tossed it onto the passenger seat of the pickup, and drove off, like a man closing an account without wanting to pay. Rosa froze on the threshold, her belly in the 4th month barely visible under her apron. She didn't scream, didn't run after him. She stood and watched the red dust the pickup kicked up on the dirt road until it disappeared over the horizon. It all started with an envelope. Joaquim returned home after a meeting with Vicente Lacerda Noronha, his partner and loyal friend. An abandoned envelope lay on the veranda. Inside the envelope, photographs, printed messages, everything very carefully selected, very skillfully arranged to look like the truth. Rosa with another man. Rosa wanting to take the family land. Rosa the traitor. Joaquim threw the envelope on the kitchen table without saying a word. Rosa came from the garden with her hands still dirty from the soil, saw the scattered materials, and immediately understood what was happening. Joaquim, this isn't true. You need to listen to me. I've heard enough, he said, without turning his face to her. You didn't even look at me. Look me in the eyes and tell me you believe those photos. He looked for a second, then averted his gaze to the window. I saw what I saw. You saw what someone slipped to you so you'd see it. Silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest and doesn't let you breathe normally. Rosa knew this silence. It was the silence of Joaquim's pride. When he entered that state, there was no conversation, no argument, no proof that could reach him. Pride was louder than reason. You're leaving because of some papers? She asked. I'm leaving because I've lost trust. You never had trust. You only had benefit. Joaquim took the suitcase that was already packed in the bedroom. Rosa realized he had packed it before coming home. He had decided everything before hearing a single word. So, it's all decided, she said quietly. He didn't answer, passed by her in the doorway without touching her, without glancing at her belly, without goodbye. He descended the 3 steps of the veranda and headed straight to the pickup. Rosa placed her hand on her belly, took a deep breath, and stood there until the road silence became just wind and crickets again. In the following months, she waited, not for him, but for the moment when the tears would stop flowing. They stopped. Not immediately, but gradually, like clearing after a long rain. Dona Lourdes, the neighbor living about 300 meters away, came first. She appeared with a pot of chicken broth and remained silent for a long time. She just sat next to Rosa on the veranda and stayed. You'll manage, Dona Lourdes said at the end of the day. I know, Rosa replied, and she truly believed it. In Goiás, Joaquim didn't look back. At least, he tried not to. Vicente already had the next step ready. Cheap land, investor money, quick growth. Joaquim threw himself into it headfirst, because work was the only thing he knew to silence his thoughts. Nights came. Nights when he woke up in the middle of the silence in his apartment in Goiânia and lay staring at the ceiling, unable to really understand what he felt. It's not longing, he told himself, just fatigue. A lie he repeated for 7 years until he almost believed it. Meanwhile, Rosa Maria Pereira gave birth to a girl with dark eyes and hair black as coal. She named her Ana Vitória. She registered her with the surname Pereira, because that surname belonged to her no less than to anyone else. The girl grew up among rows of corn, chickens wandering freely in the yard, and the smell of wet earth after rain. She grew up listening to her mother sing while working. She grew up not knowing her father's name, but knowing that her mother never cried in front of her. And when the girl once asked, looking at the roses with those eyes that were exactly like Joaquim's, "Mom, do you have a dad?" Rosa didn't look away. She answered with the firm voice of someone who had rehearsed the answer 1,000 times. Yes. One day you'll meet him. She just didn't know that day was closer than she thought. The money came fast, too fast for someone not used to it. Joachim was 45 years old, with 3 farms registered in his name. He had an office for negotiations overlooking the center of Goiânia and a phone that never stopped vibrating. He had everything an ambitious man dreams of when he's young and has nothing. Only now that he had it all, the dream didn't have the taste he expected. Early in the morning, before the sun heated the asphalt, he was already up. Black coffee without sugar, as always. He sat on the apartment balcony and watched the city wake up below. Cars small like ants. Lights in buildings going out one by one. He was a successful man. Everyone said so. Vicente came to meetings, spoke loudly, slapped Joachim on the shoulder, presented him to investors as if it were his personal achievement. This man left the backwoods of São Paulo with nothing, and look where he is now. Joachim smiled. The right smile at the right moment. He had learned that too. When the meeting ended and the hallway emptied, he exhaled through his lips, like a man dropping a load he'd carried all day. The business grew because he worked like few others do. He woke up earlier than everyone, went to bed later than everyone. He studied soils, irrigation, the grain market, logistics. He learned everything he needed to learn to depend on no one. Or at least, that's what it seemed to him. What he didn't learn was to look inside himself. At the bottom of the desk drawer in the office lay a photograph. He couldn't explain why he didn't throw it away. It was a small photo, taken many years ago at the St. John Festival in the backwoods. Rosa was in a red dress with white polka dots. She was laughing at something someone said. The laugh was real, without pretense. Joachim had accidentally saved this photo inside an old document. One day he found it by chance and looked at it longer than he should have. Then he closed the drawer. "Are you okay?" The secretary asked one afternoon, lightly knocking on the office door. "Yes," he replied, without lifting his eyes from the table. Dr. Vicente called, said he'll delay the meeting scheduled for 3. "Okay, let me know when he arrives." The secretary left. Joachim froze his gaze on the computer screen, but saw nothing. He was thinking about what Vicente had dropped a few weeks ago. Almost casually, almost by accident. That area in the backwoods of São Paulo is getting really expensive. Too bad your ex is still holding on to that scrap of land at the end of the world. Joachim hadn't responded then, but the information stuck. It lodged deep in his consciousness like a splinter that doesn't always hurt, but hurts when you least expect it. A few days later, he asked the team to pull up the rural property registries in the Itapetinense district. It was a new project, one Vicente had sketched on paper with nice numbers and optimistic forecasts. For it all to work, a specific strip of land was needed to connect 2 already purchased plots. Without it, the project didn't come together. When the report came, Joachim ran his finger down the list of owners and stopped at one name, Rosa Maria Pereira. He stared at those 4 words for a while, then closed the report, stood up from the chair, and walked to the window. Below, the city lived in its usual rhythm. Traffic jams, horns, hurrying people. Joachim wasn't thinking about the city, he was thinking about how much time had passed. 7 years. A whole life of work and silence. And now her name appeared in a business table, as if the past had decided to knock on the door without warning. He returned to the desk, opened the report again, carefully read the property data as he would any other document. The land was small, but located exactly where needed. From a business perspective, the decision was simple. Go there, make a fair offer, sign the papers, and return. Rosa probably needed the money. 7 years alone in the backwoods, with a small farm. The amount he would offer would be high, much higher than the land's market value. She would agree. He was sure of that. He asked his assistant to book a ticket and rent a car. He didn't tell Vicente. He informed him he was going to handle a personal matter. And he went, without imagining what awaited him at the end of that road. The dirt road started right after the gas station at the town entrance. Joachim knew this road. He had driven it hundreds of times many years ago, when life was simpler and problems fit into a veranda conversation. Now he drove in an expensive rented car with icy air conditioning and leather seats, and the road remained the same. The pothole in the same place, the sharp turn by the stream, the smell of wet grass seeping through the window crack. He didn't warn of his arrival, decided it was better that way. A visit without notice, quick, direct, arrive, talk, offer, resolve, without pomp, without delays. The V-Center project he had developed was ambitious. An integrated production zone with its own storage and logistics corridor straight to the highway. The numbers were good. Investors had already expressed interest. Only that strip of land was missing to make the project make sense on the map. Without it, the corridor didn't close. And without the corridor, transportation costs increased so much that profit shrank more than half. Joachim had learned to solve such tasks. Find the knot, go straight to it, untie it without drama. Only this time, the knot had a name. He stopped the car on the edge of the compacted earth and opened the map on his phone. The property was about 2 kilometers from there. The plot a little over 20 alquiers, according to the registry. Small by agribusiness standards, enough to block an entire project. Joachim looked out the window. The sky was clear, that saturated blue that happens in the backwoods of São Paulo at the start of the day. On the other side of the fence, a bull grazed. High in the sky, a hawk circled, in no hurry. He took a deep breath and started again. On the way, he mentally built what he would say, without beating around the bush. He'd say he's expanding the business in the region, that her property happened to be in the project's path, that the offered amount is fair, even generous, that she could use the money to start over in another place with more comfort. It was a reasonable proposal. Any sensible person would agree. Joachim thought of nothing else. He didn't think about how she looked now. He didn't think about how much time had passed. He didn't think about the words they exchanged last time. He thought about the project. He thought about the numbers. He thought about the signature on the agreement. The entrance to the property appeared on a gentle curve of the road. Simple wooden gates with a metal plaque nailed to the crossbar. Santa Aurora Farm. Joachim stopped the car and stared at that plaque for a few seconds. The name was new. When he left, the property had no name. Everyone just called it Rosa Family Farm. She gave this place a name. He got out of the car, opened the gates, and drove slowly down the inner path. On both sides, corn plantings. The rows were even, the soil well tended, without weeds between the plants. It was a small farm, but arranged with the kind of care visible from afar. At the end of the road, the house. Joachim remembered a simple building with peeling plaster in places and a veranda on 2 wooden posts that swayed in the wind. Now the house was painted white with light yellow details. The veranda had been remodeled with a polished cement floor and a long bench of dark wood against the wall. On both sides of the door stood pots with plants. Red flowers, names he didn't know. He turned off the engine. The farm silence rushed in at once. Crickets, wind in the corn leaves, a dog that barked twice somewhere in the back and fell silent. Joachim sat in the car for a moment, not understanding why. It was just a deal. He had conducted hundreds of negotiations more complex than this, sitting opposite bankers, investors, lawyers, and never felt the heaviness in his chest he felt now. He opened the car door and got out. The smell came first. Earth, young corn, and something he couldn't define. A smell belonging to this house, this veranda, this specific place on earth. A smell he knew. He came for business, he was sure of that. Only his legs grew heavier with each step to the door. And before he reached the veranda, he heard a voice from the side of the house. A quiet, ringing, joyful child's voice. The girl ran between the corn rows with an ear in her hand. Joachim stopped in the middle of the path and froze, not quite understanding what he saw. The child was about 6 years old, black hair loose, pink sandals on one foot, the other foot bare. She ran, laughing at something only she knew, holding the ear like a trophy. Then she stopped. Saw the unfamiliar car. Saw the man frozen in the middle of the path. And suddenly became serious. The way children become serious when they notice an unfamiliar adult nearby. She pressed the ear to her chest and stood there. Joachim couldn't move, because those eyes, those dark deep eyes with slightly furrowed brows of someone assessing the situation. He knew those eyes, saw them every day in the mirror. "Who are you?" The girl asked directly, without ceremony. Joachim opened his mouth, and nothing came out. "Did you come for my mom?" She continued, tilting her head to the side. Yes, he managed to say. The girl assessed the answer for a second, then turned and shouted toward the house. "Mom, there's some man here." Joachim's heart did something strange in his chest. It wasn't quite pain, more a sudden squeeze, like when you remember something forgotten and realize you shouldn't have forgotten it. Rosa appeared from the side of the house with a hoe in her hand and an old scarf tied on her head. Her boots were muddy, shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows, and the expression of someone torn from important work. She first saw the car, then him. She didn't cry out, didn't step back. She froze for 2-3 seconds with the hoe in hand, looking at Joachim with an expression he couldn't read. Then she took a deep breath, leaned the hoe against the wall, and said in the calm voice of someone controlling every word, "Anna Vittoria, go wash your hands and drink the juice in the fridge." "No, Mom, who is this man?" "Go, daughter." The tone wasn't angry, it was firm. The girl looked at Joachim one last time, still pressing the ear to herself. Then she entered through the back door, without hurrying. Rosa descended the 2 steps from the side of the house and walked to Joachim. Stopped about 3 meters away. Close enough to talk, far enough to make it clear. This wasn't a welcoming approach. "Joachim," she said. Just the name, without surprise, without extra emotions. "Rosa," he replied. They looked at each other for a moment. 7 years had passed over her differently than he expected. She had become stronger, her face had gained some sun marks, some wrinkles around the eyes, but she had a groundedness that wasn't there before. A woman who doesn't need anyone's approval to know who she is. "You could have warned me you were coming," she said. "I know, I needed to resolve one matter, and I decided it's better to come in person." "Resolve a matter?" She repeated slowly. "It's about the land. I have a proposal for you." Rosa looked at him for a second, longer than comfortable, then turned to the veranda and said, "Then come in, I'll brew coffee." It wasn't a warm invitation. It was rural politeness, the kind that dictates receiving a guest with coffee, whoever the guest may be. Joachim climbed the veranda steps and entered through the front door. But inside it smelled the same, of wood and earth. It was clean, neat, with that look of care that comes not from money, but from attention. A shelf with a few children's books. A child's drawing taped to the wall. A pitcher with field flowers on the kitchen table. Joachim stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do with his hands. From the hallway came the sound of running water. The girl was washing her hands, as her mother had ordered. Rosa put the coffeepot on the stove and stood with her back to him for a moment. When she turned, she crossed her arms and asked straight, "What proposal?" Joachim opened his mouth to answer, but before the first word flew out, Anna Vittoria appeared in the kitchen doorway with a glass of juice in hand, hair still tousled, barefoot still without sandal. She looked at Joachim with those eyes that were his eyes, and asked without any ceremony, "Are you my dad?" Joachim looked at the girl, unable to answer. Anna Vittoria stood in the doorway with the juice glass in hand, waiting for an answer with the naturalness of asking a strange dog's name. Without drama, without fear, just honest curiosity in her eyes. Rosa moved first, approached her daughter, knelt before her, and spoke in a quiet voice. "Remember I told you that one day you'd meet your dad?" The girl nodded. "That day has come, but now Mom needs to talk to him, okay? Go snack in the room, and then we'll talk together." Anna Vittoria looked at Joachim again, then at her mother. "He looks like the photo," she said. Rosa closed her eyes for half a second, sighed, then kissed her daughter on the forehead. "Go, daughter." The girl left. Her steps faded in the hallway, and somewhere deep in the house a door closed carefully. Rosa remained kneeling on the floor for a moment, back to Joachim. When she rose and turned, her face was composed, no tears, no visible anger, just that firmness he noticed from the start. "She has my photo," said Joachim. The voice came out quieter than he planned. "I gave it to her so she'd know where she came from." Rosa answered, returning to the stove. "Sit." He sat on the wooden chair at the kitchen table. The coffeepot began to bubble. Rosa stood with her back, leaning her hands on the sink edge. "How old is she?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 6. Turned 6 in March. March. 9 months after July. Joachim calculated automatically, quickly, and it added up. Rosa turned with 2 coffee cups and set one before him, sat on the other side of the table, cupped her mug with both hands, as if needing the warmth. "You came to talk about the land," she said. "Then talk, Rosa. Talk about the land, akin, and then we'll deal with the rest." He looked at the cup, then at her. "I have an expansion project in the region. I need a strip of land connecting 2 territories I've already bought. Your property is right in that path. I came to make a purchase offer. Rosa said nothing, continued listening. The price is good, above market. You could use that money to buy a larger plot elsewhere, with better infrastructure, more comfort for you and the girl. Silence. Rosa slowly turned the cup in her fingers. You came here, she said slowly. After 7 years, without warning, not asking if I'm alive, not wanting to know that here, in this house, a daughter is growing, to buy my land. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation aloud, the kind one says to make sure they understood right. Joachim opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Rosa, what happened between us? What happened between us was your choice, she said, not raising her voice. You got an envelope with papers and photos. Asked nothing, waited for nothing, didn't want to hear anything. Packed your things before showing me what was in that envelope. Joachim fell silent. I tried to talk. She continued. You said you'd heard enough. Remember that? I remember. Then you know it wasn't betrayal that made you leave, but choice. The coffee cooled in the cups, neither drank. Joachim looked at the field flowers in the jar in the middle of the table. Looked at the girl's drawing pinned to the wall. Crooked wax crayon lines, a yellow house, 2 figures, one tall and one small. Below, in still unsteady child's letters, letters of a child learning to write. Me and Mom. Only 2 figures. Who did it? He suddenly asked. Who dropped that? Rosa raised her eyes to him. Vicente, she said, your trusted partner. He needed you to leave Sampa with enough anger not to look back. With you in Goys and me out of the way, he had free access to the dealings. Joachim felt his stomach turn. Do you have proof? I didn't need proof, I understood then, but you wouldn't have believed anyway. She said it without venom, just with the direct honesty of someone who had processed it long ago. Joachim looked at her, the tan traces on her face, the roughened hands around the cup, the woman who stayed, raised the daughter, built the farm, and didn't go demanding explanations from anyone. Rosa, You don't need to apologize now, Joachim, she said. You didn't need to apologize 7 years ago. And now there's a daughter who asked if you're her father, and you'll have to decide what to do with that. From the hallway came a light sound of bare footsteps approaching the kitchen door. Anna Vittoria appeared in the doorway with the empty juice glass in hand, and her eyes immediately went to Joachim. Have you finished talking? Rosa looked at her daughter and smiled briefly. Not yet, sweetie, but you can come in. Anna Vittoria entered the kitchen with the empty glass in hand and went straight to put it in the sink, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Then stopped, leaning on the countertop and looking at Joachim with that serious childish expression when you want to understand something but lack the words to ask. Joachim didn't know where to look. At the girl it was too heavy, at Rosa heavy in another way. Want more juice? Rosa asked her daughter. No, all good. Anna Vittoria answered, then turned to Joachim. Do you live far? He blinked. I live in Goys. Is Goys close? No, it's like 1,000 kilometers from here. The girl processed it in a second. So, you took a very long time to get here. The phrase sounded simple, without accusation, but hit Joachim like a fist in the gut. Rosa looked at the coffee in the cup, and to Vittoria no leave it, Joachim said quietly. He looked at the girl. You're right, I took too long to get here. The girl looked at him for a moment, then pulled up a chair nearby and sat, putting both elbows on the table and propping her chin on her hands. And why did you take so long? She asked. Joachim opened his mouth, closed it. How to explain to a 6-year-old that the father left because of pride, believed a lie because it was easier than trusting, chose anger instead of asking? I got lost on the way, he said finally. Anna Vittoria thought about it for a few seconds. Like when I go picking flowers in the field and wander too far, and Mom starts worrying. Joachim felt his throat tighten. Kind of, he replied. Mom always comes for me when I'm lost, the girl said very seriously. But you're big. No one came for you. Rosa slowly stood from the chair and went to the window. Stood with her back to them both, looking into the yard. Her shoulders were straight, restrained, but Joachim saw her hand grip the sink edge. No one, he said to the girl. That's why it took so long. Anna Vittoria paused for a moment, then asked, Will you leave again? The question hung in the kitchen air. Joachim looked at Rosa, who still stood with her back, then looked at the girl, at those dark eyes waiting for an honest answer. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I came here. That's already not what I did before." The girl carefully assessed the answer, then nodded, as if finding it reasonable. Rosa turned from the window. "Anna Vittoria, go get your drawing album and sit on the veranda a bit, okay? Your dad and I still need to talk." The girl slid off the chair without objections, but at the kitchen door stopped and turned to Joachim. "Do you like corn?" she asked. He was thrown for a second. "Yes. We grow corn here," she said with huge and sincere pride in her voice. "I help." Then she left. The sound of her steps faded in the hallway, and the veranda door opened and closed. Rosa stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms crossed, looking at Joachim. "She's always like that," said Rosa. "Direct, says what she thinks, no beating around." "She's amazing," said Joachim. And he said it with sincerity he hadn't planned. That just burst out. Rosa didn't answer right away. Walked to the table, sat again, and looked at the cup of coffee that was now completely cold. "Joachim, you came here to buy my land. I need you to understand something before we talk about it." "I'm listening." "I raised this girl alone, without alimony, without visits, without calls, without anything. Not because I wanted to hide her from you, but because you left and didn't look back. I didn't run after you, because it wasn't my duty to prove anything to anyone." "I know." "You don't know," she said calmly. "You think you know, but you weren't here when she was born, and no one was by my side in the ward. You weren't there when her temperature rose to 40, and I rode my bike to the medical post at 2 in the morning because the car broke down. You weren't there when on her 4th birthday she asked why all her friends have a dad and she doesn't." Joachim didn't take his eyes off the table. "What you've done all this time doesn't erase what I had to do," continued Rosa. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you so you understand the scale of what was missing." "I understand." "Then understand the following. This girl is not exchangeable coin. There's no deal she participates in. If you want to be a real father, you'll have to build it from scratch, with patience, with presence, as she needs, without rush, imposing nothing." "And you?" he asked. Rosa raised her eyes. "I am her mother. I always was and always will be. What was between me and you ended 7 years ago on the threshold of that door. No return to that." Joachim fell silent. From the veranda came the light sound of a colored pencil scratching paper. Anna Vittoria was drawing, unaware of the conversation's weight on the other side of the wall. "Can I see what she's drawing?" he asked. Rosa looked at him for a second. "You can," she said. Joachim slowly rose from the chair, approached the veranda door, and opened it carefully. Anna Vittoria sat on the wooden bench with the album on her knees, tip of her tongue slightly out from concentration. Hearing the door, she lifted the album to show, even without his request. On the paper, 3 figures drawn with wax crayons. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. Below, in crooked and proud letters I, Mom and Dad. The night that day came slowly. Joachim stayed longer than planned. It wasn't a conscious decision, it just happened. Anna Vittoria showed the entire drawing album, page by page, explaining each drawing with the seriousness of someone presenting important work. He listened to every explanation, not interrupting once. Rosa watched from the kitchen window while washing the cups. When the sun began to vanish, Rosa appeared in the veranda doorway with car keys in hand. "Anna Vittoria, go change. We'll go for bread to Donal Ewards. Can I show him the farm first?" the girl asked, already pointing to the cornfield. Rosa looked at Joachim. He silently waited for her answer. "Quick," said Rosa. "It's almost dark." Anna Vittoria jumped off the bench and ran to the corn rows. Without waiting 2 seconds, Joachim descended the veranda step and followed her, at her pace. The girl ran ahead, jumping over small stones, skirting pits she clearly knew by heart. She talked non-stop. "This corn is almost ready. Mom says when the top wrapper starts browning, it's time. Do you know?" "I know," he said. "Do you grow corn too?" "I do, but on a large scale. Machines do everything." Anna Vittoria turned to him with a look of slight disappointment. "Here we plant by hand. Mom says when you plant by hand, you learn to respect what grows." Joachim looked at the neat rows, the dark loose soil between plants, the girl's small hand lightly touching leaves on the go. "Your mom is right," he said. They reached the end of the row, where plantings gave way to open space with an old fig tree in the middle. The tree was large, with roots lifting the ground around, like fingers emerging from under the soil. "This fig tree is the oldest on the farm," announced Anna Vittoria, carefully placing her hand on the trunk. "Mom says her great-grandmother planted it. That was a long time ago. Very long ago. Did you know her great-grandmother?" "No, didn't get to." The girl looked at the tree for a moment. "Everything that lives long has deep roots," she said with that childish seriousness when repeating what you've heard from adults, not yet knowing the full weight of those words. Joachim froze, felt that phrase in a place he didn't expect to feel. They returned to the house when the sky was almost dark. Rosa waited on the veranda with a bag on her shoulder and the expression of someone delayed longer than intended. "Well, go change, Anna Vittoria." The girl ran into the house. Rosa descended one step and stopped, looking at Joachim. "You needed to talk about the proposal," she said. "Needed to. Then talk." Joachim shoved his hands in his pockets, looked at the distant fig tree, already turning into a dark silhouette against the sky. "The land strip I need runs along the eastern boundary of your property, about 4 alquirs. The price I'm ready to offer is triple the market. With that money you can buy a larger plot, better equipped, in better conditions than here." Rosa listened without blinking. "You'd have capital left for investments in production, infrastructure improvements, a more comfortable life." Silence. A chicken crossed the yard in the thickening twilight. A dog somewhere deep in the yard stirred in the kennel, made a short sound, and quieted again. "Finished?" asked Rosa. "Finished." She descended the last step and stood opposite him, arms crossed, calm voice. "Joachim, this land was abandoned when my father left it to me. I cleared the overgrowth with my own hands. I replanted everything anew. I repaired this house with money from 3 consecutive harvests, saving penny by penny. I brought Anna Vittoria home from the hospital and put her to sleep in this house that same evening, because there was no one else." She made a short pause, not for effect, but to breathe. "This land isn't property I own. It's what I built when I was alone and could have given up. There's no sum that can buy it. Rosa, you didn't come here to help me. You came because you need the land for your project. I understand, business is business. But don't sell me the idea that you're thinking of my comfort. Because you didn't think of my comfort 7 years ago and haven't started now." Joachim looked at her. He had no ready answer. Tried to find and didn't find. "The offer is made," he said finally. "No need to answer now." "I've already answered," she said simply. The front door opened, and Anna Vittoria appeared in a clean sweater and combed hair. The ponytail this time straighter. "Ready," she announced, as if she'd won some victory. Rosa looked at her daughter, and her face completely changed. Became lighter, more open, with that warmth that appears only when looking at the person who is the meaning of everything. "Then let's go." Anna Vittoria passed by Joachim and stopped for a second. "Will you be here when we return?" Joachim looked at Rosa. Rosa said nothing, left the choice to him. "Not today," he said to the girl, "but I'll return." Anna Vittoria became serious for a second, then extended her hand to him, officially, that small hand, like a person sealing a deal. "Promise." Joachim looked at that open palm, short fingers and palm still smudged with wax crayons. Bent down and carefully shook it. "Promise." The girl nodded satisfied and went to the car, without looking back. Rosa passed by Joachim, saying no more, but at his shoulder level slightly turned her face and said quietly, only for him, "If you make this girl suffer, Joachim, there's no agricultural project in the world worth what it'll cost you." It wasn't a threat, it was a maternal warning. And a maternal warning has a weight no contract carries. Joachim slept poorly that night. The hotel was simple in central Idapedaningi, with a ceiling fan that creaked at an irritating frequency, and a window overlooking the street where trucks passed in the middle of the night. He lay with open eyes, staring at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. Then gave up trying to sleep, sat on the bed edge and stayed that way, elbows on knees, head down. Thought about the girl's handshake. That small hand, smudged with wax crayons, holding his hand with seriousness 6-year-olds shouldn't need. A child asking for a promise like that has already learned promises can go unfulfilled. Has already learned people leave. Joachim stood, went to the window, and looked at the empty street. A truck passed slowly, making the window tremble slightly. He thought about Vicente, thought about how easily he believed that envelope, the photos that now, from 7 years' distance, he could see differently. They were too good, too neatly selected. No real betrayal comes in an envelope with such quality prepared material. Real betrayal is mess, contradiction, full of inconsistencies. That was fabricated, and he accepted it because it was an easy out. That thought caused more pain than any other, because it meant not only Vicente erred, he did too. He preferred to believe because it was simpler than sitting opposite Rosa and admitting the marriage was hard. He worried about dealings, feared falling behind as the world accelerated. It was easier to leave with anger than with guilt. Early morning, before hotel breakfast, he called the lawyer in Goiânia. I need you to pull everything you can on Agronaut's corporate movements over the last 7 years. Contracts, transfers, powers of attorney. Everything. Some specific problem? The lawyer asked with a just-woken voice. Possibly yes. Want to see first before confirming. Hung up, asked for coffee at hotel reception, and sat at a small table by the entrance with phone in hand, waiting for the day to start. Documents started arriving during the morning by email. Scan files, some poor quality, others clearer. Joachim opened one after another with the focused attention he used in big negotiations, where every comma matters. Almost 3 hours passed before a pattern emerged. It was subtle, well hidden in layers of legitimate documents, but it was there. Powers signed on dates not matching registered meetings. Share transfers through his signature, but ones he didn't remember consciously approving. Among large document packages Vicente always presented in haste, saying it was urgent. Money leaving company accounts to a side firm where, when Joachim checked the CNPJ, founders included Vicente's cousin. It wasn't large theft, it was smart theft. Small enough not to attract attention, frequent enough to accumulate over years. Joachim stared at the phone screen long. Felt cold anger slowly rising. Not that hot anger he felt 7 years ago seeing that envelope. Hot anger passes quick, cold anger stays. He called Vicente. 3 unanswered calls. On the 4th, he answered. Joachim, I was just about to call you. When are you back from São Paulo? Back tomorrow, said Joachim. Voice came out calm, restrained. I need you in the office at 9 a.m. Of course, no problem. Any news on negotiations with the ex? Joachim closed his eyes for a second. We'll talk tomorrow, he said, at 9. Hung up without extra words. Remained staring at the coffee glass that had cooled on the table. Remembered how Rosa spoke in that calm voice in the kitchen. Vicente is your trusted partner. She knew. Knew then and didn't seek proof, because she knew he wouldn't believe. And she was right. Next morning, Joachim was in the Goiânia office at 8:45. Sat and waited in his chair with documents open on screen and printed folder on desk. Vicente arrived at 9:02 with his usual broad smile. Well, how'd it go? Did Rosa agree to sell? Close the door, said Joachim. Vicente closed, sat in the chair across the desk with the expression of someone not yet noticing the ground gone from underfoot. Joachim turned the computer screen to him. Explain this to me. Vicente looked at the documents. The smile faded slowly, like sugar dissolving in hot water. This is analysis out of context, he said. You need to understand the full picture before. I understand the full picture, interrupted Joachim. It took me 7 years to understand, but now I do. Joachim. 7 years ago you fabricated an envelope with fake photos and messages and slipped it to me, because you wanted me to leave São Paulo with enough anger not to ask anything and give you freedom in the business. Vicente didn't answer. I abandoned my pregnant wife because of a lie you fabricated, continued Joachim, voice still restrained but with a thread of hardness that cut. My daughter grew 6 years without a father because of a lie you cooked up in less than a day. You believed because you wanted to believe, said Vicente. And there was calculated coldness in that reply. Joachim remained looking at him. You're right, he said. I believed because I wanted to. That's my fault too. But I won't leave your part like that. He opened the desk drawer and placed a letter before Vicente. Partnership dissolution. My lawyer has documented everything. You have 48 hours to sign, or we'll go another way. Vicente looked at the letter, then at Joachim. You'll lose money on this. I've already lost something more important, replied Joachim. The partnership dissolution cost dearly, not just in money, though that was plenty. It cost time, energy, sleepless nights reviewing contract after contract with lawyer on the phone. Vicente signed in 36 hours. Not from remorse, but because the documents Joachim had were enough to turn dissolution into something much worse for him. When it all ended and the last paper was signed, Joachim remained sitting in the empty office, lights off, looking out the window at the movement below. He lost money, lost a partner who, despite everything, knew the backstage of every negotiation in the last 7 years. He lost a structure that took years to build. But there was a difference between that night and the night he left the backwoods of Sao Paulo with fury and suitcase in hand. That night, 7 years ago, he left thinking he was right. This night he knew exactly where he erred. That difference fixed nothing, but was the start of something honest. 3 weeks later, Joachim returned to Itapedaningi. This time warned ahead. Sent Rosa a short message the evening before. Can I stop by tomorrow morning? Stared at the screen 10 minutes, waiting for reply. When it came, it was just one line. You can. Ana Vittoria will be here. He arrived at 9 a.m. With the car full of things he bought, not really knowing what to bring. A box of children's books the bookstore seller recommended for 6-year-olds. A wooden constructor set, a plant seedling in a small clay pot, because amid the bookstore was a flower section. And he froze, looking at plants, unable to leave empty-handed. When he got out of the car, Rosa stood on the veranda with coffee cup in hand. Looked at the packages and seedling and said nothing. Just nodded slightly, pointing to the door. Ana Vittoria appeared before he reached the veranda. Ran from the yard, barefoot, hair loose. Stopped 2 meters away and stared at the packages wide-eyed. What is all this? Brought some things. For me. For you. The girl looked at her mother. Rosa made an imperceptible nod meaning you can. Ana Vittoria approached and took a small package with both hands, looked inside and pulled out one book. The Girl Who Planted Stars. She read slowly, piecing syllables with the concentration of one learning to read. Then raised her face to Joachim. Do you read well? The bookstore girl helped. Do girls plant stars? Open and find out. Ana Vittoria sat right there on the veranda step and opened the book to the first page. Joachim stood, watching her read, other packages still in hands. Rosa descended the step. You can leave them here, she said, pointing to the veranda bench. Coffee's ready. He left the packages on the bench, including the seedling. Rosa lingered her gaze a second on the clay pot and went inside. Joachim sat on a chair on the veranda outside while Ana Vittoria continued reading on the step. From time to time the girl turned a page and muttered something to herself, agreeing with the story. Rosa returned with 2 cups, set one before him and sat on the other side's chair with hers. How did the situation with Vicente resolve? She asked. Resolved. Partnership dissolved. Cost dearly. It did. Rosa cupped the mug with her hands. I'm sorry. Really sorry, he said. It was necessary. They were silent for a while. It wasn't heavy silence. It could be the silence between 2 people who've already said hard things to each other, and now learn to be in one space without turning it into battle. She asked about you, Rosa said quieter. Joachim looked at the girl on the step. What did she ask? If you'd return? Asked 3 times on 3 different days. He fell silent. I don't know how to do this, he said finally, with simple honesty, not trying to seem surer than he was. Don't know how to be father to a child who doesn't know me. Don't know the right measure of approach. What to say, what not to say. Rosa looked at him. There's no right measure, she said. There's presence. That's different. How's that? Presence is coming, asking how the week went, listening to the full answer without looking at the phone, coming to the school performance even if it's just 15 minutes of kids singing off key. That's presence. Joachim looked at the cup. I can do that. Then do it, she said simply. Ana Vittoria raised her eyes from the book. Dad. The word flew out so naturally that Joachim needed a second to realize it was him being called. Look. Here the girl plants a starfish in the sand, said the girl, showing the illustrated page. Is that real? Starfish live in the sea, but in the story it can be real. Why can it in the story? Because story has that freedom. The girl thought it seriously. Cool, she concluded, and returned to the book. Rosa looked at Joachim. On her face was an expression not exactly approval, but something close. That day Joachim stayed until early afternoon. Helped Anna Vittoria plant the seedling from the clay pot in a yard corner she chose herself, next to the old fig tree. The girl dug the hole with a small green-handled shovel leaning on the shed. Placed the seedling carefully, pushed soil around with both thumbs, and then looked at the plant with satisfaction. "Don't water it every day?" she asked. "This plant twice a week." "How do you know?" "I've worked long with plants." The girl looked at him sideways, but with interest. "With machines?" "With machines," he confirmed, but learned the basics earlier. Anna Vittoria looked at the planted seedling. "I'll watch it grow," she said. Not as question, as plan. Joachim looked at the girl, squatting on the ground with dirty knees, hair falling on her face. "We will," he said. Rosa stood at the back door, watching them both. When Joachim raised his eyes and saw her there, she didn't avert her gaze. Looked a second, then returned to the house. It wasn't forgiveness, not hard opening. It was a mother watching a man who finally was where he should have been from the start. I can do this enough to continue. Winter came that year slowly. Mornings in the backwoods of Sao Paulo state became colder, with that low fog covering fields till mid-morning, giving everything an old photo look. Corn was harvested and land rested, dark and damp, waiting next cycle. Joachim came 4 times since the first visit. Not with oversized gifts, not with money, not with proposals. Came with presents, as Rosa said. Appeared Saturday afternoon to help fix the chicken coop fence that collapsed after heavy rain. Appeared weekday morning to drive Anna Vittoria to school when Rosa's car was in repair. Appeared one afternoon without reason. Just with 2 kilograms of cheese buns bought at town bakery, and simple question at door. "Can I come in?" Rosa opened the door without ceremony. He learned the school schedule, learned Anna Vittoria doesn't like papaya but eats mango anyway, fears thunder but admits to no one, and sleeps hugging a worn plush dog she got from Dona Lourdes when born. Learned Rosa wakes at 5:30, drinks first coffee still in dark, loves silence till 7 a.m., and when angry, doesn't speak but silently starts cleaning what doesn't need cleaning. He learned all this as one learns when truly paying attention. One July morning Joachim arrived without suit. Jeans, long-sleeve checkered shirt, leather boots that had seen real work. Brought in the truck bed several vegetable seedlings bought at town nursery, because Anna Vittoria said last week she wanted to plant carrots, and he remembered. Anna Vittoria waited at the gate when he arrived, as if knowing the schedule by heart. "Brought carrots?" she shouted before he turned off the engine. "Brought. I already dug the planting spot. Let me see if it's a good spot." She took his hand naturally, without thinking, and pulled toward the yard. Joachim let himself be led. Rosa was at the house side, fixing a climbing plant support that grew crooked. When she heard steps and daughter's voice, raised her eyes. Saw Anna Vittoria's hand holding Joachim's. Said nothing. Returned to the climbing plant, but in that gesture was a lightness she didn't try to hide. The carrot hole was in the yard corner, next to the seedling they planted together weeks ago. The seedling had grown several centimeters, strong in the dark soil. "See it grew?" Anna Vittoria pointed with pride. "See. It'll turn out well. I watered Monday and Thursday, as you said. Didn't forget once." "So, you grew it?" The girl looked at the plant with quiet pride, the kind that needs no audience. They spent all morning planting carrot seedlings. Anna Vittoria dug with the shovel. Joachim leveled distance. She patted soil and lightly slapped with palm. They worked with synchronicity no one taught, that appeared gradually, visit by visit, day by day. Dona Lourdes appeared mid-morning with a jar of boiled condensed milk she cooked the night before. Stopped at the gate, looking at the 2 squatting on the ground, then entered quietly, without calling. Rosa came out to meet the neighbor on the veranda. "What a beautiful picture," said Dona Lourdes quietly, looking at the yard. "Yes," replied Rosa. "And all. You okay?" Rosa looked for a moment at daughter and man squatting on the ground. "Yes," she said. And it was true. It wasn't the happiness of one with everything settled. It was the peace of one who built what needed building and owes no account. Donna Leeward squeezed her hand with that old calloused hand that held Rosa's hand in the hospital night 6 years ago. No need to say anything more. Early afternoon, when sun was high and yard smelled of wet soil and freshly planted carrots, Rosa called both to lunch. Table set for 4 plates. Joachim stopped in kitchen doorway when he saw it. Rosa stood back, stirring a pot on stove. "You can sit," she said, without turning. He Saturday. Anna Vittoria sat nearby, still with dirt under nails she tried to scrub, losing one nail, another without much success. "Need to wash hands," said Joachim. "Trying. With water it'll be better." The girl looked at him with expression of one getting obviously unneeded info. Stood and went to sink. Rosa smiled, back to daughter. It was quick, unnoticed smile, but it was. They lunched 3, Donna Leeward's company in corner, more talking than eating, telling old backward stories from which Anna Vittoria laughed that open child laugh filling the whole house. Joachim watched daughter laugh, and tried to hide nothing on face. After lunch Anna Vittoria asked to show him new school notebook. They sat on veranda bench, page by page, she explained each assignment, he listened with seriousness it deserved. Rosa washed dishes, listening their voices from outside through open window. When finished, dried hands with kitchen towel and froze a moment, leaning on sink. No romance there, no promise of new start. There was a 6-year-old daughter showing school notebook to father with pride of one finally having someone to show. And there was a woman who built everything herself and needed no approval to know her worth. Rosa approached veranda door and stopped in doorway. Joachim helped Anna Vittoria write her name in new notebook with nicer handwriting. Big hand over small, slowly guiding pencil. Anna Vittoria raised notebook to show Mom. Turned out nice, Mom. Dad taught me. Rosa looked at letters in notebook, looked at Joachim. He said nothing, asked no approval, waited no praise. Looked at daughter with that expression of man finally understanding what's really important. Rosa stood in doorway another second, then turned and went for coffee. Because good guest gets coffee. And because some stories don't end with embrace or kiss, or reconciliation. They end with man learning to carefully write daughter's name on winter afternoon on wooden bench of farm he once tried to buy and now understood would never be his, but which kept in yard corner plants he helped grow. And that, for now, was more than he deserved, and more than he expected. Dear listener, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, not everyone has the patience to listen to such a story to the end, without rushing. If you stayed with me, it means something in Rosa's silence or Joachim's stubbornness touched something there, inside, right? I wrote every line of this story thinking how our life consists of such hard choices. We look at Rosa and somewhere deep see a bit of ourselves. That strength we take from who knows where, when ground slips from under feet. That desire to protect those we love, even when heart is broken to pieces. Sometimes we wait a lifetime for apologies that never come, or changes someone promised and didn't fulfill. Rosa teaches us that peace comes not when the other changes, but when we decide another's mistake won't define who we are anymore. She opened the door to Joachim not because he deserved it. She opened because her daughter deserved a father. And she herself deserved to no longer carry the weight of that anger. If you've had to start from zero, if you looked at an empty road and had to pave your own path, accept my hug now. You are much more than any betrayal or any evil word they tried to make you believe. Look at all you've already planted, the carrot that's grown in your garden, and the strength in your hands. You are the author of your most beautiful story. Thank you for sharing this time with me. We'll meet in the next story with fresh coffee and open heart. So, how did you like the story? Leave your opinion in the comments. We really